Stories in the Gospels of the Nativity. We know Matthew pretty well. It's interesting. We know Luke pretty well. It's interesting. John, not so much, for two reasons. First of all, John doesn't go into all of the shepherds and the wise men and all of the happenings there in Bethlehem. And secondly, John's deep. And I don't like to read things that I might have to read 6 times before I get it. Well, I'm well past 6 times, and I'm not sure yet that I get it. But there's a lot of meat in the Gospel of John about the birth of Christ. Hear his words as we begin in John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. I learned something this year at Christmas, or at least it's been made much clearer to me, that the story of Christmas does not begin in Bethlehem at the manger. The story of Christmas begins thousands, millions of years before Bethlehem. The story of Christmas began in the heart and in the mind of God. James Weldon Johnson was a playwright back in the early 1900s, and he wrote a marvelous play. The name of that play was God's Trombones. Anybody familiar with God's Trombones? James Weldon Johnson was an African-American man. He became the head of the NAACP in the early and mid-1900s. A tremendous mind, a tremendous intellect, but above that, a tremendous Christian. And in God's Trombones, he puts these words into God's mouth. And God says, I'm lonesome. I think I'll just make me a world. And that's exactly what God did. God made a world, a beautiful garden world with birds singing and flowers blooming, mountain streams flowing, and mighty oceans glistening under this magnificent golden sun. And in the midst of that garden, God placed his highest creation. He placed a man. And he placed a woman who had every good thing. And he placed them there to sustain life. And that first man and woman should have lived happily ever after. But so should we all too. We haven't gone far. But it became quickly apparent as you read the Genesis story that there was a problem, a real problem in paradise. And that problem lay within the heart of humanity. So you see, God created man and woman happy in his own image. And God created them not to be puppets, not to be marionettes there in that paradise to dance as he pulled the strings. God created humanity to be his partners. And maybe James Weldon Johnson was right. Maybe God really, really was lonely. And God created human beings to mirror many of his own attributes. Here's God. Here's Adam and Eve. They look similar. You see God's attributes in Adam and Eve. And he created these beings with such spiritual potential, and that potential was for communion with himself. And to this couple, he gave one critical, one overriding important attribute. And that attribute was the ability to do what? To choose. To make choices. To make decisions. And they had that choice. They could choose life or death. They could choose good or bad. They could choose dark or evil. What a gamble. What a gamble God took in order to create humanity with the choice. But he created them to have fellowship with him. The gamble was this, though, folks. He gave these creatures, these human beings, the ones that we know as Adam and Eve, he gave them the ability to reject the love that he gave to them. So God gave man and woman the power to choose. There's a Scottish philosopher from back in the early 1900s. His name's Thomas Carlyle. And he summed up human nature like this. Here are his words. There are depths in man that go to the lowest hell, and heights that reach the highest heaven. And then Carlyle asks this question. Are not both heaven and hell made out of him, mankind? The everlasting miracle and mystery that he is. That's heavy duty. The theology of John is deep. And philosophers and theologians over the years have dug and dug and dug, and some of them have fleshed out such wonderful stuff. And I like what Carlyle says. Think about it. As long as human beings have been on the earth, that's you and me. That's Adam and Eve. And that's everyone in between and all who will follow. The struggle for their identity begins to come to the surface. Do we strive for the stars? Or are we content to grovel in the mud from which we're created? It's interesting. There's almost immediately within that very first family, so many years ago, what do we see there? Jealousy, resentment, even murder. Humanity hasn't improved too much since then, has it? Same problems. Each generation is as bad as the first. Now, that's not to say everything's bad. Certainly there have been noble men and faithful men and women, such as Abraham and Sarah, who heard God's voice, and together they went off into a distant land and they began a new people. There was a remarkable son of Israel, Joseph, who trusted God, even when his brothers threw him in a well, even when his brothers sold him into slavery. And while he was in jail there in Egypt, he still believed. He still believed that God was with him. And with that faith and with that confidence, he so managed his life that he managed to climb the ladder and climb the number 2 man in all of Egypt. And the Bible is full of many others, men, women, those of great faithfulness. We're not to believe that everybody was a savage before Jesus Christ. It's absurd to think that. But we've got to know that just like today, the world was full of evil. And that evil manifested itself in people. So, humanity's record on earth really is rather dismal. Think about today and the times that we live in, when evil seems so much stronger than good, when love seems to be swallowed up by hatred, when men rule by the sword, and might is so frequently mistaken for right. The world was in darkness, and the greatest darkness was in the heart of human beings. Today, is the world in darkness? And is that darkness in the heart of human beings? But thank goodness for those Hebrew prophets. They had knowledge. They had foresight that God was not finished with His creation, that God's love and His desire for fellowship with humanity had not changed one iota. He would complete the work that He had begun at the creation of the world, but there's a change. This time, He would disguise His intent. He would hide what He was about to do. He would hide it in the form of a tiny baby in a manger in a hardscrabble town called Bethlehem. And that our story should move into Bethlehem of Judea is a real mystery. There, waiting patiently, is the soon-to-be mother, probably no older than 16. What's her name? Mary. An angel had appeared to her in a dream and asked her to believe the incredible. The angel asked her to believe that she was to be a mother and yet remain a virgin, and that the son she would bear would be the Savior of all mankind. Now, that would be a lot for me to swallow. And for a non-believer, I'm not sure any of them could digest it. But Mary, oh Mary, Mary had the faith of the proverbial mustard seed. And her words that we find in the Song of Mary and the Magnificat, I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled. And there beside Mary, over there in the stable, stands her husband. And he was so patient. And he was so in love. And his name was Joseph. And Joseph believes in his bride just as much as he believes in God. And then there's some sheep. And there's some oxen. And there are a couple of donkeys over there that complete that tableau. And later on, if you look, there'll be some shepherds who claim that they were serenaded by angels as they guarded their sheep out there on the hillside. And later, well, there they are, will come traditionally 3 magi, magicians, astrologers, wise men, call them what you will. And they're bringing with them those gifts that we call gold and frankincense and myrrh. And they say, we have seen his star from afar and have come to worship him. Great story. We've known it forever. What does all of it mean? Well, the writer of Gospel of John tries to tell us in beautiful but very deep theological language when he says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In him was life. And that life light was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.